The Thunderchild's emergency sirens wailed as Captain Winters clutched the command chair, her knuckles white against the synthetic material. Smoke filled the bridge as secondary explosions rippled through the lower decks. "Damage report," she shouted over the chaos. Lieutenant Park, blood streaming from a gash on her forehead, frantically worked her console. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. Life support at 60% capacity. Weapons systems offline. The ship's AI, Athena, spoke in its measured tones despite the catastrophe unfolding. "Captain, I've sealed affected sections. Casualty reports incoming. Engineering reports critical damage to the primary drive core." Winters swallowed hard, tasting copper. "Communications. Still operational, but degraded," Park responded. "The Exorexian vessels are maintaining position. They're not pursuing." The tactical display showed the crystalline alien ships holding formation, making no move to finish off the crippled human vessel. It wasn't mercy, it was contempt. "They don't think we're worth chasing," Winters realized aloud. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing the Hyraxian overlord once more. Its scale-covered face showed no emotion their human eyes could recognize, but the posture, mandibles raised, neck frill extended, conveyed unmistakable disdain. "Primitive species," the translator rendered its clicking speech. "Your ship's pitiful resistance has been documented for our biological archives. Your technology is rudimentary. Your biological composition is unremarkable. Your world holds no resources unique enough to warrant harvesting." Winters struggled to her feet, determined to face this threat standing. "We came in peace. We still desire peaceful." "Peace is irrelevant," the Hyraxian interrupted. "The Dominion expands. Worthy species serve. Unworthy species are removed. You have been categorized as unworthy. Your solar system will be cleansed within 1 stellar rotation of your primary world. This communication ends." The screen went dark as Chief Medical Officer Reyes burst onto the bridge. "Captain, we need you in medical." "Security, Chief Rivera. He's asking for you." The journey to Medical Bay revealed the true extent of the damage. Crew members worked frantically to extinguish fires and seal breaches. The wounded lined the corridors, those able to move helping those who couldn't. In Medical Bay, Rivera lay on a surgical table, a massive support beam impaled through his lower torso. His dark eyes found Winters as she approached. "Captain," he whispered, "I got everyone out of engineering before the coolant ruptured." Winters took his hand. "I know, Marcus. Dr. Rice will fix you up." Rivera's smile was ghastly. "Don't lie to a dying man, Elena. We've known each other too long." Dr. Rice shook her head slightly behind Rivera's line of sight, confirming what Winters already knew. The damage was catastrophic. "The Hyraxians?" Rivera asked. "They're letting us retreat. They're coming for Earth in 1 year." Rivera's laugh turned into a wet cough. "Big mistake. Should have finished us when they had the chance." "Save your strength," Winters urged. "No time for that." Rivera pressed his dog tags into her palm, closing her fingers around them. "Humanity isn't going down without a fight. Promise me." "I promise," she whispered. "Good." His breathing grew labored. "You know what makes humans different, Elena. Other species evolved to thrive. We evolved to survive. There's a difference." His eyes fixed on something distant. "We're coming for them. All of us. Even the dead." Rivera's hand went slack in hers as Athena's voice came over the comms. "Captain, emergency FTL drive is online. We can make one jump toward Earth before complete system failure." Winters stood, Rivera's dog tags cutting into her palm. "Take us home, Athena. We have a war to prepare for." As the Thunderchild limped into FTL, the Hyraxian fleet remained, already dismissing the encounter from their collective consciousness. They had encountered thousands of species across the galaxy. None had ever surprised them after initial assessment. That was about to change. Dr. Maya Chen traced her finger along the transparent cell wall, mapping the electrical pathways that controlled the locking mechanism. 23 days in captivity had taught her much about Xeraxian technology. It was advanced, but remarkably standardized. Their adherence to convention bordered on ritualistic efficiency through uniformity. She murmured, recalling the phrase from the daily propaganda broadcasts. The Xeraxians' rigid thinking was both their strength and, potentially, their weakness. The lighting shifted to a purple hue, indicating the ship's night cycle. Chen pressed herself into the corner of her cell as heavy footsteps approached. Two warrior-caste Xeraxians dragged a semi-conscious human between them, Lieutenant Harding from Engineering. They deposited her roughly in the adjacent cell. Subject displays inadequate recovery rate. One guard clicked to the other. Mark for disposal after final testing sequence. Chen waited until the guards departed before whispering, Sarah, it's Maya. Stay with me." Harding stirred weakly. Her arms bore the telltale marks of Xeraxian neural probes. They kept asking, "Why we fight when we know we'll lose?" she rasped. "They don't understand why we don't surrender. They measure strength differently," Chen replied, slipping her improvised tool, a flattened food container edge, from its hiding place. "They value uniformity, predictability, hierarchy." "What are you doing?" Harding asked, noticing Chen working at the cell's access panel. "Testing a theory." Chen slid the makeshift tool along a barely visible seam. Their systems are designed to detect sophisticated escape attempts, electronic bypasses, forced entry. But they're not looking for something this primitive. The panel popped open, revealing a nest of crystalline circuitry. Chen studied it, comparing it to the mental map she'd constructed over weeks of observation. 3 weeks ago, I wouldn't have understood any of this, she admitted. But watching them, listening to them, they don't hide their knowledge because they don't consider us capable of comprehending it. Her fingers worked quickly, rearranging crystal nodes in a pattern she'd observed a technician use. Their entire society is built on the premise that certain things are impossible without specific training. The idea that a lesser being could learn by observation alone never occurs to them. The force field between their cells flickered and died. "Rest," Chen told Harding, moving to help her. "I'm getting us out of here, but I need your help with something first." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Admiral Jackson stood before the newly formed Earth Defense Council. The chamber, hastily converted from the United Nations General Assembly, buzzed with tense energy as representatives from every major nation awaited his presentation. "The Thunderchild's sensor logs confirmed what we suspected," Jackson began, his weathered face grave on the massive screens. "The Xeraxian fleet outmatches us in every conventional metric. Their weapons systems, shield technology, and propulsion capabilities exceed our most advanced prototypes by centuries." Murmurs of despair rippled through the chamber. However, Jackson continued, bringing up new data streams. Captain Winters identified a critical characteristic in their attack pattern. The Xeraxians value efficiency above all else. Their tactics were mathematically perfect and completely predictable. He gestured to Dr. Kozlov, who stepped forward with a series of equations hovering above his tablet. "They fight like machines," Jackson explained. "No improvisation, no adaptation mid-battle. They execute optimal strategies with precision, but when faced with the unconventional, they hesitate while recalculating." The Admiral's eyes swept the chamber. Humanity has never had the luxury of fighting optimal battles. Our entire military history is a study in asymmetric warfare, desperate gambles, and impossible victories. He brought up schematics of Earth's existing fleet, a patchwork of vessels never designed for the coming conflict. "We will not win a conventional war against the Xeraxians," Jackson stated flatly. "So we won't fight one. Project Phoenix begins today. We're going to rebuild our fleet, but not as pale imitations of their warships. We'll create vessels that embody what they don't understand about us." On the Xeraxian mothership, Chen helped Harding into an access corridor, pausing as a group of service-caste aliens shuffled past, never looking up to notice the escaped humans. "Where are we going?" Harding whispered. Chen's eyes gleamed with determination. "To show the Xeraxians exactly what they've underestimated." Lieutenant Commander Sato felt the rockbreaker shudder as its mining drills, now repurposed as weapons, tore through the hull of a Xeraxian scout ship. The vessel around her groaned in protest. It had never been designed for combat maneuvers. "Hull integrity at 62%, reported Ensign Diaz, a former mineral prospector who'd volunteered when Earth put out the call. His hands trembled slightly over the unfamiliar tactical controls. "Hold position in the debris field," Sato ordered, studying the battle map. Saturn's rings provided perfect cover, billions of ice particles and rocks disrupting Xeraxian sensors while human ships darted between them. "Prepare for another pass when Target 3 emerges from the current." The command center of the rockbreaker bore little resemblance to its original configuration. Mining equipment displays had been hastily converted to tactical stations. Civilian crew operated alongside the handful of military personnel Admiral Jackson had been able to spare. What they lacked in training, they made up for in determination. "Commander," called out the comms officer, "distress signal from the Persephone. They've taken heavy damage at Sector 4. Sato grimaced. The Persephone was a research vessel, its only weaponry retrofitted mass drivers designed to launch scientific probes. "Tell Captain Mbeki to fall back to the secondary defensive line. We'll cover their retreat." The rockbreaker's engines growled as Sato pushed them beyond recommended limits. Through the view screen, she watched the massive form of a Xeraxian cruiser emerging from Saturn's shadow, its crystalline hull glinting in the distant sunlight. "They're tracking the Persephone," Diaz reported. "Targeting systems locked. All power to forward shields," Sato commanded. "Plot intercept course." The navigator looked up in alarm. "Ma'am, their vessel mass is at least 10 times ours. Direct intercept would be." "I'm aware of the math, Lieutenant," Sato cut him off. "Execute the order." The rockbreaker surged forward, ice particles from Saturn's rings scattering against its shields like diamond dust. The massive Xeraxian cruiser loomed ever larger, its weapon systems charging with an ominous blue glow. "They've spotted us," Diaz announced. "They're adjusting vectors." Sato allowed herself a grim smile. "Exactly as predicted. Release the probe drones." From the rockbreaker's cargo bays, dozens of small, unmanned vehicles burst forth, each carrying a payload of the densest mining explosives humanity had developed. Originally designed to break apart asteroids, they now hurtled toward the Xeraxian cruiser's propulsion array. "All hands, brace for emergency maneuvers," Sato warned. "Executing slingshot protocol. Now." The rockbreaker dove beneath the plane of Saturn's rings, using the planet's gravitational field to whip around in a turn that subjected the crew to forces the ship's inertial dampers could barely handle. Warning lights flashed across every console as structural integrity alarms blared. Behind them, the swarm of mining drones impacted the Xeraxian cruiser. The explosions weren't enough to destroy the massive vessel, but they compromised its maneuvering thrusters. The alien ship began to drift helplessly into the denser portions of Saturn's rings. "Cruiser 1 is immobilized," Diaz reported, unable to keep the wonder from his voice. "Their shield geometry can't handle the constant impacts from the ring particles." On the tactical display, other human vessels reported similar successes. The converted science vessel Galileo had used Saturn's magnetic field to disable 2 scout ships, while the cargo hauler Olympus had sacrificed itself to destroy a Xeraxian destroyer. Sato opened a fleet-wide channel as the rockbreaker regrouped with the remaining human ships. "All vessels, execute contingency pattern Delta. We've bloodied their nose, now let's make them chase us through the outer system." As the battered human fleet dispersed, following the carefully planned retreat vectors, Sato received one final transmission from Earth Command. Admiral Jackson's voice came through with unmistakable satisfaction. "Well done, Saturn Defense Group. The Xeraxians just learned that humanity doesn't fight fair. Return to designated rallying points and prepare for Phase 2. The rockbreaker limped away from Saturn, its civilian crew exhausted but victorious. Behind them, damaged Soraxian vessels regrouped, their once perfect formation now ragged and disorganized. They had expected an easy conquest. Instead, they'd gotten their first taste of humanity's desperate ingenuity. Dr. Kozlov stared at the holographic simulation as it played out once more, the mathematical representations of space-time twisting and collapsing under the influence of his theoretical weapon. Dark circles underlined his eyes. He couldn't remember when he'd last slept properly. The gravity lance isn't just bending space, he explained to the small group of scientists and military personnel gathered in the underground facility. It's creating a temporary rupture that allows us to weaponize the fundamental forces of the universe itself. Admiral Jackson stepped forward, studying the simulation with narrowed eyes. And the risk assessment. Kozlov's shoulders slumped slightly. Still catastrophic if containment fails. We've improved the focusing arrays, but there's a non-zero chance that a full power deployment could create a cascading reaction. Meaning, prompted a general from the Chinese Space Force. Meaning it could potentially create an expanding singularity that would consume our solar system. Kozlov stated flatly. The mathematics suggest we could contain it, but this moves beyond theoretical physics into realms we've barely explored. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. It was Captain Winters who finally spoke, her voice steady despite the exhaustion evident on her face. "We're not just fighting to win a battle," she said. "We're fighting for the right of humanity to exist at all. The Soraxians have made their intentions clear. There will be no surrender, no terms, no coexistence. If the gravity lance gives us even a small chance of victory." Kozlov nodded grimly. "We've prepared 3 prototype units for deployment. The Defiance, the Valkyrie, and the Prometheus will each carry one. If they all fire simultaneously at the correct coordinates, the overlapping fields should stabilize each other." "Should," Jackson repeated. "That's the best I can offer, Admiral." Jackson turned to the tactical display, showing the approaching Soraxian fleet. Their scouting force had regrouped after the Saturn engagement and continued their methodical advance, now reinforced by the arrival of their main battle group. "Begin final preparations," he ordered. "The gravity lance will be our last resort, not our first option. I want conventional strategic plans ready within 24 hours. As the meeting dispersed, Kozlov remained, staring at his simulations. The mathematics were elegant but terrifying. Creation and destruction balanced on the edge of an equation. Meanwhile, aboard the Soraxian mothership, Dr. Chen moved silently through the maintenance shafts with Harding and 3 other escaped prisoners. They had established a small base in an unused storage compartment near the ship's outer hull, careful to remain undetected by the increasingly agitated Soraxian crew. "This is it," Chen whispered, pointing to a junction box where numerous crystalline data conduits intersected. "The neural network hub for this section of the ship." Engineer Petrov, his left arm ending in a hastily bandaged stump where the Soraxians had taken samples, examined the alien technology. "You're sure this connects to their command communications?" Chen nodded. Warrior-cased Soraxians receive tactical updates through direct neural interfaces. If we can introduce our data packets here, they'll be distributed throughout the command structure. "And they won't detect the intrusion?" Harding asked. "That's the beauty of it," Chen explained, carefully removing the access panel. "We're not changing their data. We're adding context. Every time their system transmits footage of human prisoners or battle recordings, our algorithm appends additional data from the ship's own memory banks." "What kind of data?" asked Rodriguez, a communications specialist who'd been presumed dead after the Thunderchild attack. Chen's eyes gleamed in the dim light of the maintenance shaft. Footage of humans enduring their torture procedures without breaking. Records of our adaptability under extreme conditions. Their own scientific analyses showing how quickly we learn compared to other species they've studied. She connected the crude device they'd assembled from scavenged parts. The Soraxians believe absolutely in hierarchy, that some species are inherently superior to others. We're going to plant seeds of doubt about where humans belong in that hierarchy. As the device activated, pulsing softly with alien energy, Shan allowed herself a small smile. They think they're studying us, but we've been studying them too. And we've learned their greatest weakness. They cannot conceive of being wrong about their place in the universe. Across the vast emptiness of space, two species prepared for a confrontation at Jupiter. One relied on overwhelming force and technological superiority. The other placed its hopes on desperation, innovation, and the stubborn refusal to accept extinction. Captain Wei felt the Defiance shudder beneath her feet as another Xeraxian energy blast glanced off their failing shields. Jupiter's swirling clouds filled the view screen, its massive gravity well both sanctuary and trap for the embattled human fleet. Shield capacity at 27%, reported Lieutenant Oko, blood trickling from his nose after the last impact threw him against his console. Gravity lance charging sequence at 83%. Wei steadied herself against the captain's chair. Maintain position. The Valkyrie and Prometheus need 2 more minutes to reach optimal firing coordinates. The tactical display showed the desperate ballet unfolding around Jupiter's upper atmosphere. Human ships darted between the gas giants' radiation belts, using the planet's electromagnetic interference to mask their movements, while Xeraxian vessels pursued in their disciplined formations. Multiple hostiles changing vector, warned the tactical officer. They're adapting to our maneuver patterns. Wei smiled grimly. They're learning. Implement randomization protocol Delta. The order cascaded through the fleet. Every ship immediately altered course in seemingly chaotic directions, breaking the patterns they'd deliberately established over the first hours of battle. The Xeraxian pursuit faltered momentarily as their predictive algorithms struggled to recalculate. Lance synchronization signal from the Prometheus, Ocho announced. The Valkyrie confirms ready status. Wei opened a secure channel to Admiral Jackson's command carrier. Defiance reporting ready status. Gravity Lance at 91% charge, requesting final authorization. Jackson's weathered face appeared on the small command screen. The Xeraxians have committed 80% of their fleet to this engagement. This is our best chance. He hesitated briefly. Captain Wei, if containment fails. I know, Admiral. Wei interrupted quietly. The Defiance crew volunteered for this mission with full knowledge of the risks. We'll ensure the Lance deactivates properly, one way or another. Jackson nodded solemnly. Authorization granted. May God help us all. Wei turned to her bridge crew. Target the concentration of Xeraxian dreadnoughts at coordinates 227 Mark 43. Synchronize firing sequence with Valkyrie and Prometheus. The Defiance's engines strained as the ship aligned precisely, forming an equilateral triangle with its sister ships against the backdrop of Jupiter's Great Red Spot. The deck plates vibrated as the gravity lance drew enormous power from the ship's reactor. Firing solution locked. Okyo confirmed. Synchronized countdown initiated. 10 seconds to discharge. Wei watched the Xeraxian fleet on the tactical display, their formation shifting as they sensed the energy buildup. Too late, they realized the trap. 5 seconds, Okyo counted. 4, 3. The ship's computer spoke in its neutral feminine voice. Warning. Containment field fluctuation detected. 2, 1. Fire, Wei ordered. 3 beams of distorted spacetime lanced out from the human vessels, converging at the heart of the Xeraxian formation. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then reality itself appeared to fold inward, light bending around a rapidly expanding sphere of absolute darkness. Containment field holding at 60%. Okyo reported, his voice tight with tension. The singularity is stable but growing beyond predicted parameters. The view screen showed Xeraxian dreadnoughts being pulled inexorably toward the artificial black hole, their hulls stretching and distorting as they approached the event horizon. 3 massive ships disappeared completely, while others fired their engines at maximum thrust, barely escaping the gravitational pull. The Prometheus reports containment field failure, Oko suddenly shouted. The singularity is becoming self-sustaining. We stared at the readings in horror. Kaslov's warnings echoed in her mind. An uncontrolled singularity could potentially consume the entire solar system. All power to engines, she ordered. Take us directly into the event horizon. Her executive officer stared at her in shock. Captain, the Defiance carries the primary containment codes, Wei explained calmly, strapping herself into her chair. If we detonate our reactor core at the subspace frequency Kaslov calculated, it should collapse the singularity. She opened a fleet-wide channel. All vessels, maximum retreat velocity. The Defiance will handle containment. As the human fleet scattered, the Defiance drove straight toward the growing black hole, its hull groaning under the gravitational stress. Wei watched the Xaraxian fleet doing the same, retreating in disarray, their perfect formations shattered. They expected us to value self-preservation above victory, Wei murmured as darkness engulfed the view screen. Another miscalculation. The Defiance vanished into the singularity, and moments later, a blinding flash of energy marked its sacrifice as the artificial black hole collapsed upon itself, leaving only scattered debris where 3 Xaraxian dreadnoughts had been. For the first time in their long history of conquest, the Xaraxians retreated not by choice, but by necessity. Emperor Kazrillik slammed his armored fist into the holographic display, shattering the projection of the Jupiter battlefield. Fragments of light scattered across the command chamber like dying stars. Inexcusable, he hissed, his dorsal spines fully extended in rage. Your forces outnumbered them 7-1. Your technology exceeds theirs by centuries. Yet you return defeated by primitives. Fleet Commander Drex lowered his head in submission, the ceremonial markings on his scales dulled with shame. Emperor, they employed a weapon of unprecedented destructive capability. Analysis suggests they weaponized a controlled singularity. Impossible, snapped Science Minister Vexus. Their understanding of subspace mechanics is rudimentary at best. Our infiltration of their communications networks showed no evidence of such technology. Nevertheless, Drex continued, 3 capital ships were lost. The human vessel responsible sacrificed itself in the process. The Emperor's inner eyelids flickered in confusion. Clarify. They destroyed their own ship. Deliberately, Emperor. When the singularity threatened to expand beyond its containment field, they piloted directly into it and detonated their power core. Silence fell across the command chamber as the Xaraxian leadership struggled to process this information. Such an action defied their understanding of rational behavior. They violated their own survival imperative, Vexus finally said. No sentient species we've encountered has willingly chosen certain death when escape was possible. The Emperor turned to his strategic oracle, an ancient Xaraxian whose scales had faded to translucent white with age. What say you, Oracle? How do we defeat an enemy who does not fear death? The Oracle's response was interrupted by a subordinate officer rushing into the chamber, a serious breach of protocol that caused several guards to raise their weapons. Forgive the intrusion, the officer stammered, but we have a significant security breach. The human prisoners have escaped. The Emperor's rage was palpable, the air around him crackling with pheromonal fury. How long? Unknown. Emperor, we discovered empty containment cells during routine inspection. Security monitors showed no evidence of escape. Impossible, Vexus repeated, but with less conviction. The officer continued reluctantly. There's more. We've detected anomalies in the neural network. Information packets about the humans have been altered. Vexus approached a data terminal, mandibles clicking rapidly as she input commands. The main display illuminated with security footage, humans in laboratory chambers, enduring tests designed to measure pain tolerance and psychological breaking points. What am I seeing? The Emperor demanded. These are standard species evaluation protocols, Vexus explained. But someone has appended additional data showing. Her voice faltered. Showing that humans endure stress conditions at rates exceeding even warrior case tolerances. Drex studied the footage with mounting concern. This has been distributed throughout the command network to every neural receiver on the mothership. The officer confirmed. Lower-caste warriors are asking questions. The Emperor's rage transformed to cold calculation. Quarantine the neural network. Purge all data regarding human resilience. And find those escaped prisoners immediately. Deep within the mothership's engineering section, Dr. Chen huddled with her growing band of resistors. Not just humans now, but members of other subjugated species who had been inspired by their defiance. A Cletheri engineer, his insectoid features impossible to read, manipulated a stolen command tablet. The data packets were received by 97% of neural implants before they initiated countermeasures, he reported, his translator rendering his chittering speech. The command structure is destabilizing. Chen nodded, studying the ship schematics they'd pieced together. And the primary reactor control room. Minimal security. The Cletheri confirmed. They never anticipated internal threats reaching such critical systems. Harding looked up from where she was teaching a group of slaves how to convert maintenance tools into weapons. You're not suggesting what I think you are. Chen's expression remained resolute. The mothership coordinates their entire fleet. If we can trigger a reactor overload sequence, that's suicide, Rodriguez protested. No, Chen corrected quietly. It's sacrifice. There's a difference. She looked around at the faces of humans and aliens who had joined their resistance. Captain Wei understood that difference at Jupiter. Now it's our turn. As alarms began to sound throughout the massive vessel, Chen gathered her unlikely army. The question isn't whether we'll die today. The question is what we'll die for. She held up a makeshift detonator cobbled together from scavenged parts. And I choose to die making sure humanity has a fighting chance. Admiral Jackson stood in Earth's orbital command center, watching as humanity's final defensive line began to crumble. The massive view screen showed the Xaraxian fleet approaching Earth's orbit, their formations slightly less perfect than before, but still overwhelming in number. Orbital defense platforms 3 through 17 have been neutralized, reported General Santos, her uniform dusty from the recent impact that had rocked the station. The lunar batteries are still operational but running low on ammunition. Jackson studied the tactical display with eyes that hadn't slept in nearly 48 hours. The battle had raged for 6 hours already, and the outcome was becoming grimly clear. The remaining human vessels fought with desperate courage, but physics and numbers couldn't be denied. Status of Protocol Omega, he asked quietly. Santos looked up, her expression grave. The activation systems are ready. 200 satellites in position, awaiting your command. Colonel Davis, the youngest member of the command staff, spoke hesitantly. Sir, those platforms, they're centuries old. We can't be certain they'll even function. They'll function, Jackson replied with certainty. Cold War paranoia ensured they were maintained long after the treaties officially decommissioned them. The station shuddered as another impact struck the deflector shields. Lower orbital shield grid at 30%, announced the defense systems officer. Another concentrated barrage will break through to the atmosphere. Jackson straightened his shoulders and took a deep breath. Send the evacuation order to all military personnel on the orbital platforms. They have 15 minutes to reach the escape pods. He turned to face his command staff. And send the activation codes to Protocol Omega. Authorization Jackson, 795 Alpha. Santos nodded solemnly and turned to her console, inputting a complex series of commands. Protocol Omega initiated. Satellite activation sequence commencing. On the surface below, billions of humans watched the battle raging in their skies. The flashes of weapons fire and exploding ships created daytime auroras visible, even through cloud cover. In cities across the globe, civilians stood in streets, parks, and on rooftops, faces upturned to witness humanity's last stand. In Tokyo, an elderly woman stood in a crowded plaza as news feeds projected the battle overhead. A young reporter thrust a microphone toward her. Aren't you afraid? The government has advised everyone to seek shelter." The woman smiled gently. "I have lived 92 years on this earth. I survived wars, earthquakes, and pandemics. If this is humanity's last day, I will face it standing on the ground that birthed me, not hiding underground." Similar scenes played out across the globe as humanity collectively refused to cower in its final hours. In orbit, Jackson watched as the first wave of Cyraxian vessels broke through the defense grid, their weapon systems charging for planetary bombardment. He opened a global channel, his voice reaching every remaining communication system on Earth. "People of Earth, this is Admiral Jackson. The enemy has breached our outer defenses, but humanity still has teeth." His voice remained steady despite the weight of his next words. "Protocol Omega authorized. Across Earth's orbit, 200 satellites, relics of humanity's Cold War era, simultaneously activated. For decades they had orbited silently, their true purpose hidden by false designations as weather or communication platforms. Now, ancient nuclear warheads, preserved in the vacuum of space, came to life. The command center screens washed white as hundreds of nuclear detonations created a lattice of electromagnetic disruption encircling the planet. The Cyraxian fleet, caught in the perfect positioning Jackson had lured them into, suddenly found their targeting systems blinded, their communications disrupted, and their shields fluctuating. "It worked," Santos whispered in awe. "For now," Jackson cautioned. "We've bought ourselves minutes, perhaps an hour." His eyes remained fixed on a small anomaly in the tactical display, unprecedented energy readings emanating from the Cyraxian mothership. Something's happening aboard their command vessel. Unknown to the Earth defenders, Dr. Chen and her band of rebels had reached the mothership's reactor control room. Blood, both human and alien, stained the deck plates as the last Cyraxian guards fell. "Reactor override initiated," reported the Kultheri engineer, his limbs moving rapidly across the alien controls. "We have 7 minutes before cascade failure begins." Chen nodded, her hand pressed against a wound in her side. "Send the transmission." Admiral Winters stood at the viewport of the diplomatic vessel Endeavour, watching as the massive space station, known as the Stellar Concordance, grew larger against the backdrop of stars. The station's architecture blended multiple alien design philosophies. Crystalline structures reminiscent of Cyraxian engineering merged with the organic curves of other species' aesthetics. "Nervous?" asked Admiral Jackson, joining her at the window. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Earth, and the strain had left permanent marks on his weathered face. "Not nervous," Winters replied, fingering the dog tags she still wore around her neck. Rivera's final gift. "Just aware of the stakes." The Endeavour docked with precision, and the human delegation made their way through the station's grand corridors. Representatives from 17 formerly subjugated species waited in the central chamber, their varied physiologies creating a tapestry of life forms. And there, segregated to one section, stood the Cyraxian representatives, without their biological armor and neural implants, looking diminished but still dangerous. The Council recognizes Admiral Elena Winters, representing Earth and human colonies, announced the Kultheri chairperson, their translator rendering their chittering speech into a melodious tone. Winters stepped forward, acutely aware of how the gathered species studied her, some with curiosity, others with newfound respect, and the Cyraxians with barely disguised hostility. "I bring greetings from Earth," she began. "Humanity comes seeking neither dominance nor submission, but partnership in a new galactic community." A Cyraxian diplomat rose, his scales dulled from stress, but his posture still arrogant. "The human delegation speaks of partnership while they stand upon the ashes of our empire. Their unprovoked attack." "Unprovoked," Jackson interrupted, stepping forward with a data crystal. Perhaps the Council would benefit from reviewing certain records. The Kultheri chairperson accepted the crystal, and moments later, the chamber's main display illuminated with footage. The Thunderchild's first contact, the Cyraxian attack without warning, the Emperor's declaration that Earth would be cleansed. "We didn't start this conflict," Winters stated calmly, "but we did finish it." The chamber fell silent as more footage played. Human ships fighting against overwhelming odds, Captain Way's sacrifice at Jupiter, and finally, the desperate defense of Earth itself. "I've examined your records," the Heraxian diplomat sneered. "You prevailed through primitive nuclear weapons and sabotage. You claim to be a peaceful species, yet your victory relied on technologies you had supposedly abandoned centuries ago." Winter's expression remained composed. "We never claimed to be peaceful. We claimed to be survivors." She gestured to the gathered representatives. "Ask any species here what happens when existence itself is threatened. You mistake our reluctance for weakness, our compassion for vulnerability." She walked to the center of the chamber, her voice strengthening. "Humanity never developed specialized military technology because our entire civilization is a weapon. We fought with mining equipment, with civilian vessels, with centuries-old nuclear devices we couldn't bring ourselves to dismantle. We fought with everything we had because that's what humans do when cornered. We use every tool, every advantage, every desperate measure." The Heraxian diplomat seemed ready to object again, but the Cletheri chairperson raised an appendage for silence. "The evidence is clear. The Heraxian Empire instigated this conflict and threatened extinction. The humans responded to existential threat. The Council finds no fault in their actions." After the formal proceedings concluded, Winters found herself on an observation deck, gazing at the stars. A door slid open behind her, and she turned to find Dr. Chen, whose emergency teleportation seconds before the mothership's reactor detonation had become legendary. "They've approved the memorial," Chen said quietly, joining her at the viewport. "It will honor all who died, human and alien alike." Winters nodded, her fingers once again finding Rivera's dog tags. "He said humans evolved to survive, not thrive. But maybe now we can do both." Together, they watched as a small fleet of multi-species vessels departed the station, the first joint scientific expedition under the new Galactic Conquests. Human ships flew alongside vessels designed by species who, only months before, had been enemies or strangers. "They thought crushing us would be simple," Winters mused. "They never understood that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our tactics. It's our stubborn refusal to accept defeat." Chen finished with a small smile. Beyond the viewport, the stars beckoned, not as conquests or threats, but as possibilities. Humanity had survived its trial by fire. Now came the harder part, building something worthy of the sacrifice.